y'all, I'm Ellen. We've been super inspired by our journeys of self-healing and discovery.
And I'm Sam, and we want to share our experiences with you to help you get curious about yourself, reconnect, and get intentional about your life so you know what makes you happy.
Welcome to Woo New, the podcast. I have been feeling super blessed to be a part of this mystery mentorship program that has been created and led by Mimi Young, one of our guests from 2020, because it's brought me to so many incredible souls, teachers, people, students that are all learning and growing alongside me, one of which is Flory Huang, who we are so excited to introduce today. Flory and I have been getting to know each other just this year, and she's the founder of the Rest-volution. She's an intuitive coach and a personal rest guide. And I just find for myself personally that rest and pleasure have been so integral, and they have been needing to be honored in such a bigger way this year. And I think I'm just learning really in 2021 what rest really means, what it really feels like, what pleasure really means and what it feels like. The word of this year for me is luxuriate, and it speaks to rest, it speaks to pleasure, it speaks to space and stillness. So we're just really honored to have Flory here with us to kind of guide us in this conversation, to talk about her own journey and to just share what she's learned. So thanks for being here with us, Flory.
Thank you, Ellen and Sam, for having me. It's truly an honor and a joy to share time and space with you both.
I love so much that you created this community of the Rested Revolution, and I'm so curious about how you got to that point and what the community is like and how it's helped everyone who has joined it.
So, as I feel like these journeys often go, I had first spent over a decade learning over and over again for myself personally what being rested truly meant. And so, despite being in a career and living a lifestyle that I truly loved and was so reciprocal in so many ways, I just found myself tired of being tired a lot. And at one point, a couple years ago now, I had the privilege of actually deciding for the last time, because I had swam in and out of industry and then, back and forth into being self-employed and freelancing. I had the privilege to actually make a decision and launch myself into what felt like an abyss, because not many people have the accessibility to do so, nor do they make the choice to actually not work. So this was a very interesting time because, growing up, I was very involved in academia, in martial arts, in just all these activities and things to do that were very much attached to accolades and progression, right? In these like very tangible forms. And so moving into intentional resting, of course, it started out seeming very binary because, firstly, just me saying, hey, I'm not going to work right now seems to kind of be the go-to. And what ended up happening with this community was beyond anything I really could imagine. So while I was resting, I found that the insights to the human design framework were really resonating, and I was able to kind of experiment with how I was moving through my day and why. And
What are you, by the way?
I am a projector, a splenic projector.
Wow.
Yes. So it feels like I have just another layer with my very finite experience with energy reserves in this. And so, a long story short, the global pandemic actually hit. And in the short amount of time before it had arrived, I'd been feeling a calling. So coming from a human-centric design career that was very adjacent to integrated marketing and media, I am also a former personal trainer, and there's something in the space of the remembering that mind, body, spirit are not actually separate, and in what holistic health really is, there was something deeply pulling me. So I went from kind of musing and realizing, oh, nobody's really talking about or actively engaging in resting in this very cerebral modern culture. I think maybe, I want to start a project or a community and provide some services to others about this. And so when COVID-19 quarantined us all, it became very apparent to me that I needed to birth this. So even though my years of kind of the more corporate or conventional business background had initially imagined this very well thought out business model and, calendar of just, all the things that
We've
would have
totally
been great to
there.
have.
We're like, what is our projection map? And now we're like, screw the map.
Exactly. And that was also my ultimate, projector deconditioning too. Because again, the call and the need were just so loud. And so I was like, okay, we're going to release that. We are here. And so what I've found in the past 1.5 years in this community is that there are a lot of people who are paying attention, who are connected with their gifts, who have this fire in them in their personal and collective revolutions to making this shared plane just a more whole and true and less harmful space, an anti-oppressive space. And what's been really interesting is I've really watched myself recognize that when we're talking about rest, I've just become so reaffirmed, especially lately, that I am not here to remind people to rest, but that I want to talk about why we tire and how we tire, and really look at the systems that we're a part of or the systems that we've created for ourselves that maybe unconsciously, right, create any leakages or any kind of forgotten boundaries. And so it's been really beautiful in this community. I've been able to collaborate with different people and practitioners and leaders in different spaces, whether it's leadership, whether it is grief, whether it is in being a business owner, because we are whole humans that show up in these spaces ourselves. Like, we need to be tending to the unrest and the restlessness of our skin and spirit. And it really is just this layer that I feel so connected to, where I see this gift and opportunity for us to not pursue being rested as a perfectionist state or a standard, but a conscious choice in the way that we move through the world. And a large part of that as well, just again, fueled by, my own experience in my career and what were conventional corporate environments. There's a lot of embodiment of being a human in business to be had. There's a lot of embodiment of, the values that we speak of or that we share. And I believe that we can all thrive together, including profiting, right? Including celebrating diversity, including being decolonial in a way that's not at the cost of us as humans, as whole humans. And so that is the vision that I've been holding and am at times honestly a little bit overwhelmed by. But I am doing my best to continue to show up, because it's just a deep knowing that it is possible. And I see glimmers of it in so many different avenues. Of course, with how we connected, Ellen, there are just so many layers and so many portals to being, and to being our whole like spiritual and human selves, in a way that is responsive rather than reactive.
I love, first of all, I love how I don't think I ever really imagined that our burnout would be a connective tissue or it would turn into a connective tissue for so many of us. And I'm really curious, like in my own journey through this. And again, I think I'm just this year arriving at a new understanding and relationship with rest that I totally missed before. But I think I'd love for us to kind of get into the psyche of burnout, because I think the thing I've realized, and it was a big aha moment for me this year, is that for me, rest wasn't about getting enough sleep. It was more about my relationship to my self-worth and my belief that I was worthy of rest and that I didn't need to search for my worth outside of myself, which I'm still working on. But because my burnout was so connected to my need for external validation, I'm now realizing my ability to rest, like what true rest means for me is like a real deep sense of self-worth.
Yeah, that reminds me so much of, excuse me, Ellen and I were just talking about Brene Brown this morning, and she talks about how like play is time structured with, or time spent without a goal, and like there's so much shame too around just doing something for the joy of doing it, or for the the healing process of just being in the moment and creating or spending time reflecting, and it's so deeply woven into our conditioning around this burnout culture and this culture of scarcity that we have. Like the layers are so deep.
Absolutely. Well said, Sam. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting to me, even now, because we've, moved past this 1.5 year of COVID-19 and how much that has also forced organizations to look at how they're taking care of their people. I believe with burnout culture, what isn't being addressed is the culture itself. I see a lot of incentive or well-intended attempts to, supply employees with more time off or more mental health or extended health coverage. And I'm really intrigued about whether or not that is a band-aid solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only because, again, it's not binary, right? And Ellen, I really appreciate you really reflecting that rest and being rested for you truly is that experiencing and that feeling and understanding and connection with your own self-worth, because that's definitely something that I believe in the Rested Revolution community, while there are so many different definitions, when I'm talking about being rested, it is very much addressing both skin and spirit in that way, right? So it's not to say we're so slow that we're not out in the world, or that we're just going to, fold up shop and kind of be in some sort of extreme, but it's really an understanding that you can move through the world very connected to that, very grounded, very well resourced, energized, without it continuously being bought, right? Bought away from you or traded for the things that you're seeking or that you desire. And so with burnout culture, it feels like there's a lot of work still to be done there, because from my own experience, it was never the work that burnt me out, right? It was the way that people had to splice and dice and keep bits of themselves outside of the office or in,
Totally.
right? That takes so much energy.
Yeah,
It
you're
was the
effectively
way,
denying yourself all the time.
yep, yep. It was the way that oppression shows up, right? Unchecked, unconsciously, unintended. That also takes vast amounts of energy. And of course, whether you are experiencing oppression or oppressing, that is still taking much of you as well, right? There's a large cost there.
Yeah.
And so with burnout culture, Sam, you'd mentioned scarcity. That's also, I think, a huge piece of that puzzle where, I'd be really curious what leaders of these large organizations or these teams, how they would answer if we asked them, well, how much responsibility are you actually taking for your culture? Because I've also noticed in terms of accountability, we all, seem to want to be the CEO making the great decisions when it's winning awards or collecting vast amounts of profit or press. Yet we see even in our current global events, right? When it's time to step up to the bat and somebody's looking for accountability, suddenly these powerful leaders melt into their entire organizations. And it's about some sort of, unfortunately, more shallow, right? Generic corporate apology, quote unquote. And so there's something there for me when I look at burnout culture.
Yeah. There's so much too there around and I know Elle, you and I have talked about this a lot before, but especially having come from digital marketing in Los Angeles, it's like, there are certain places where you will work and they will work you 24/7. And if you don't set boundaries for yourself, no one is going to take care of you. But all of these companies tend to have these policies of unlimited, it's like the myth of the unlimited vacation time, right? Because they can say, oh, we're giving you unlimited vacation days. We don't number those, but you'll never have time to take it.
Right.
So that's the trade-off. So it's like you're always compromising some part of your well-being.
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so much shame in taking that vacation.
Yeah.
There's
It's
so
so
much
true. When people take vacations, other people would get very resentful. And it is just such a reflection of this stress and this state of unrest and unease that people are constantly existing in these cultures.
Mm-hmm. and then it becomes normalized, right? So then that's when you have these individuals who, once they do receive that time off or away, you know, I can definitely relate if I'm ever out of office. And recently I was quite surprised because I am out of the corporate environment, and yet it was kind of like, oh, okay, I need about 3 or 5 days to kind of wind down from being wound up about winding down. Like there's like a, you know, there's like that decompression time. And it's, yeah, it's such a practice because you have to actually be so diligent. And of course, this is where it's so insidious. If you're already burnt out, you don't have the energy or the capacity to show up with that diligence, right? And it kind of slips. And that's how it basically is, gradually and then all at once. We find these compounded, accumulative, chronic periods of burnout, right? And it can also be really uncomfortable to be alone with yourself with all that pressure of resting, right? Like knowing you have a finite amount of time to rest, yet you're like, okay, but this doesn't really feel really restful. And that itself can be really stressful.
Yeah. I find that work for me also was an escape. It was a very convenient way to avoid dealing with my shit, you know?
Yes.
And so that's, you know, that definitely contributed to the burnout. My perfectionism contributed to the burnout. Again, it was a lot of this needing to be validated from the external. And, you know, in a recent conversation that we had with another one of our guests, we talked a lot about burnout heroism, which is, I think, Flory, when you're talking about the culture, and I think you're bringing up a really good point about the Band-Aid solution, it's not necessarily about more time off. It's more about like what inside of us makes us feel like we can wear our burnout like a badge of honor, or that we can use it to validate ourselves and make ourselves feel worthy, you know? Like I clocked in 80-hour week this week or whatever. And like, you know, look how hard I'm working. Or Sam and I have had this conversation multiple times about not being able to go and pee in the middle of like, you know, the day because we're so going from meeting to meeting to meeting and just like so strapped. So
Yikes.
yeah, I'm curious what your experience and what you've seen, especially in your community, around the things are keeping people from like finding that true rest, like the pitfalls of this culture.
I mean, we've touched upon one already, and that is when capitalism, colonial capitalism in its current extractive form, is internalized. Right? So even though nobody is telling us that we should be working, there's a voice inside of us telling us we should be working.
Yeah.
I think you brought up a great point as well. Again, with the environment that most of us, at least, you know, in a North American culture here, are a part of, we are sold that if you work really hard, that you will be successful, and that being successful in that way is part of, you know, the accumulation of those badges of honor, where that's the American dream, that is, you know, you being a hustler, and thus it's enabling the narrative that rest is a reward, when really resting is a very foundational function of being a living organism, right? We can bring it back down to basics there. And then, of course, I think there's something in the avoidance of being able to just be busy with doing a lot rather than being and feeling, because being and feeling are really complicated. Being and feeling are things that most people are not taught or well resourced in, whether that's, you know, just their own neurophysiology, or perhaps being able to have relationships with themselves that are trauma informed, that are culturally informed. And then, of course, you know, that all seems to tie back again into colonial capitalism, in the sense that we are very much part of this hyper individualized economy where it is about survival, right? So many people actually do not have the luxury of being and feeling, because they have other basic needs that are not met by their states or by you know, their community in whichever way. And so it seems to me that, you know, there's one hand where burnout has been normalized as something that just happens, when in reality it's quite a severe, you know, form of rock bottom.
Yeah. And it takes years to hit that rock bottom. Which is
Yeah.
something crazy too that I feel like we always overlook, because it's like, oh, we realize now shit's hit the fan, you're at the rock bottom. How are you going to fix it? What changes are you going to
Yeah.
make? And people think like there's like some magical light switch you're going to find and it's going to turn on, and then everything is just going to like realign itself. And it's like, no, it took you years to get here. It's going to take a long time to heal.
Yeah. And to get out of, in a way, right? To like
Yeah.
really say no to and disentangle from and to emerge out of. And yeah, there's something about as well just how, I think I'd already kind of mentioned it, but you know, part of us showing up as who we are in every space that we're in, even when we do try to kind of fit parts of ourselves or mold our humanity in very particular configurations, you know, there's a form of restlessness there that is also avoided. And I think that is what really sneaks up on people, because you know, through a quote unquote Western or colonial lens, because there is such a heavy emphasis on what can be measured, right? And what can be proven, even though what is proven can also be biased. You know, there's a lot that gets lost for people. And I see that that's where their emotions, their energetics, their own spirituality. Of course, there are different synonyms for these things for different people, but that's where it also, right, just gets chipped away or eroded or lost. And that actually drives more of that empty feeling. And of course, our thinking brains are so hardwired to adapt and endure and tolerate and help us survive, that is where oftentimes, right, we see a lot of the bypassing, again, very much for just for the sake of survival, even, right? Arguably, some people are oppressing out of survival as well, right? And then it's just all part of this very intricate, multi-layered web. And in a culture that kind of just rewards, you know, believing in what you see, this is where we get into these really muddy waters, right? Where you can become so disconnected, that of course it would seem impossible to you that you could ever get to a point of being connected. And so, like Sam had mentioned, you know, these things build up over years. And then of course, for most people, it takes crisis to really lift that veil up, if not rip it off completely. And then to look and, you know, it's like, oh, damn, I should probably attend to this, right? Or again, for most people, it's like, oh, I actually no longer have a choice about how I attend to it. I must, right? I'm bleeding out. I am, you know, I'm miserable. I am at a point where I have lost things that matter to me because I was unable, right, to like be responsive up to this point. And of course, though, I don't believe that it's ever too late. It is better than never. And that's just part of each of our own journeys. And, I think of the Buddhist adage just speaking to all of us entering the river on our own time.
Yeah.
So it really just depends. Yeah.
It's so important too, I think, to acknowledge what you had mentioned earlier about like we are biologically hardwired to endure, and in our brains, they like, as a, for better or worse, they like predictable stories. So if you can tell yourself these stories and continue to act in a certain way, even if the outcome isn't good for you, it's predictable. And so on a subconscious level, you end up getting sort of like trapped in that loop. But I also find knowing that to be very empowering too, because it's like, this can be reworked. This perspective can be changed, but it is a practice that has to be practiced.
Yeah, absolutely.
That actually is a really great segue into the question I wanted to ask, which is, as an intuitive guide, what are the modalities that you leverage to help people, especially when they've hit that crisis space or state? For Sam and I think when we left the agency, we, like, no surprise, no coincidence, created a company that sold aromatherapy tools, things that instantly, went straight into your limbic system and helped you to just regulate and find that stillness. But I'm curious what processes you use to kind of work with people and your clients.
Not necessarily in this order. However, thinking about people who are at that rock bottom or who are just in a lot of pain or just so restless, I find that I usually begin actually non-verbally. So that is either or both, energetically with the subtle body, or neurophysiologically, right? Really tending to, okay, we're all moving through the world in these incredible vessels. How do I actually tend to myself? So I hear you on, the self-regulation. That's a huge part. But I also really encourage, even just before that, it really requires the self-awareness as well as mindfulness to really intersect at, personal meaning making in a way that it is sustainable and generative and effective, so to speak. Because while we all have universal similarities, of course, right? I've really found that unless we're really tapping into something of resonance, the likelihood of being really resistant or having a lot of trouble creating new habits or letting something go, it just is so much harder, right, if we're just kind of speaking empty words.
Right.
So those are two modalities. And I also teach meditation, so more specifically when it comes to the practice of witnessing and to being with. I do like to offer, I really enjoy leading meditations that help people explore that inner terrain and at the same time, can offer some contemplation beyond the perhaps stillness or the more mindful participation in the present. And with that, this past half or this past 1.5 years, I've really enjoyed being in group or even just being one-on-one and being able to really facilitate and create containers where people can safely and joyfully dip into really big questions, so like the deep inquiry, because again, I think there's something there when we are in power of choice and when we are really listening to what is resonating within us, that can really help just trim away the excess noise, that can really clarify what it is that we need. And ultimately, there's just also that space, right, to like really listen to ourselves in a way that perhaps we don't in other environments or because of other lived experiences. And so facilitation would be another. I'm very happy to offer that paired with for those who are open and willing with divination, because there's definitely something there as well with us acknowledging that we can connect again beyond what is seen, right, or felt or measured in so many ways. And so that's been a really beautiful gift that I've been able to also receive, with those that I serve and offer to, because it just feels so healing, even for myself,
Totally.
to be able to witness and to be able to be a part of in a way. So there's always something to take away.
Do you typically, do you use tarot as your divination tool?
So I've had experience in tarot as well as with archetypal oracle decks. I really find that level of complexity and depth and consideration is really powerful, not only for myself, but for others. And then, as you know, coming from a Taiwanese background, I've been coming back to more Qigong for energetics, as well as the I Ching and Bagua. So that's felt like it's been such a healing and expansive remembering.
So I know that you guys have been learning about I Ching with
Mimi?
with Mimi and your mystery mentorship. I'm so fascinated by this. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that works and what comes through.
Go for it, Flory.
Well, you can go ahead.
Well, to be clear, for at least for me, I don't know, you may have had a little bit more study in this, but we just started what's called the wood and metal module in the mystery mentorship. So we're about 2 sessions in learning about the I Ching, and I feel like I'm going to butcher this, but we literally this week are doing a peer practicum where we have to do readings for each other. And so we are giving, we in our groups, we have each a question that we kind of throw out there. And so by, I'm trying to remember, we're basically, the way we're doing these readings, we are kind of connecting into kind of the space of possibility, in a sense, like the yin and the yang, or it's like the space of potentiality, I would say, and connecting into that space. And we actually receive a number intuitively, and that number, Flory, you might actually be better at explaining this. I'm like, the number.
You're doing great.
It's really complicated. I know. I read about it before and I was like, what?
I mean, in essence, it's a divination tool, but it's almost kind of like you can kind of discover a series of outcomes based off of 8 archetypes within the I Ching. And like the archetype number 1 is heaven, lake is number 2. I'm not fully sure about the order just yet. I'm still kind of learning it, but fire is another, mountain is another, earth is the 8th one. And I only know that because that's like the archetype that's going to be basically my archetype for the rest of this year. So I was like really leaning into earth and trying to understand it better. But yeah, it's like, it is kind of understanding or seeing what the potential outcomes are when you are in that state of yin, and recognizing and understanding the dance between yin and yang, these 2 different energies that we all hold and that, are constantly being sort of pushed and pulled within us. But yeah, like practically speaking, basically in this particular practice, we are intuitively receiving a number. That number is we're dividing it by 8 and finding out what the remainder is. And that remainder number is essentially, it tracks to one of the archetypes. And so that archetype has a whole personality around it. It has like a whole, like there's directions associated with it. There's a whole energy with each of these archetypes. And that informs kind of how you should lean into your solution for the question that you have.
Mm-hmm. I feel like maybe like in a supplementary kind of insight, or to provide some more context practically, I feel like there are some parallels when you're pulling things like tarot or oracle decks, in the sense that you're working with a framework that informs the question or questions asked. And really, in that receptivity, in this ritual, there's also a lot that could make itself known, to guide you, to inspire you, to console you. So it's deeply personal in that way. And I did not grow up with the I Ching like very close or prominent in my upbringing, yet it's interesting talking to my father about it when I had initially told him last year, hey, I really want to learn more about this divination tool, about this, I guess in a way, this part of our culture. It was interesting because his response was like, he was like, whoa, okay. like he was a little bit surprised, but then he, like full dad mode was just like, basically not in these words, but in a way the vibe was, with great power comes great responsibility. Like he was like, are you sure you want to dive into this? Not that it was like ominous, not that he was trying to turn me off, but he really, I guess this is one of those things where, based on how he grew up, he really knows how transformational it can be, which only excited me more. And I was like, yep, okay, that's great. Like, yes, let's do it. But yeah, you did a great job explaining it, Elle. Yeah. But from what I understand, the English translation is quite literal, book of changes, I believe, right? What fascinates me is just how this text has survived centuries and yet is still so relevant. It's I believe historically, just the way that it was passed on, you could actually look at it maybe as one of the OG oracle decks, right?
Totally.
Though just in a very different form, quite literally. Not a deck of cards or necessarily always paper. I believe at one point it might have just been purely passed as oral education. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's just so, yeah,
it's
really interesting.
fascinating. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to connect to it as much as I have, and
Beautiful.
I just, my upbringing was a very Christian religious upbringing. And so I remember just even the last few weeks, I mentioned it, kind of in passing to my mom. And she, she's the very, very like hardcore Christian, one in the family. And so she was just like, I forget exactly what she said. She was just kind of like, you're not learning things that you're not supposed to be learning, right, in this class. It was
Oh.
like, to her it was almost like, I got the sense, not this harshly, but it was almost kind of like dancing with the devil in a weird way for her, and it's very
Yeah.
Black
It's
anti.
like
magic.
that, the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
energy that people have around Ouija boards.
yeah, yeah. it
Yeah.
was it was just like, what are you dealing with, like. And she was very sort of like hesitant, and there's a part of me for sure, as I'm like listening to you talk about your dad and his understanding and his respect for this beautiful
Mm-hmm.
system and framework and tool, that I wish that my mom was, and my dad's passed, but like I wish both of them or either of them would have indoctrinated me a little bit more with some of these traditional practices. And it's such a part of our culture that I feel a little bit gypped, that
Oh.
I don't have that connection, even through my parents. But I also wonder if, like, being the cycle breaker in the family, if I am the one meant to not just heal the ancestral wounds, but also reconnect to the ancestral ways,
Yes. You're here to remember. That's so beautiful.
I actually wanted to bring this next topic up. Not that it necessarily has something to do with rest, though I find that everything is interconnected in this, but also mostly because Sam is a Reiki master and she practices now. But you recently wrote a piece on your blog about how you have stopped practicing Reiki, and you had some really profound and very solid reasons why. And I'd love to open up this kind of side discussion on that too, and just hear your thoughts around it too, especially as I'm just beginning my Reiki training right now, with Marika Clymer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a personal decision. Um, for me, it also took years to get here. So I actually first trained and was attuned probably 2.5, almost 3 years ago. And this was after, a very transformative year, maybe two, of receiving Reiki. And it was just such a powerful healing modality that really transformed all my relationships, and really brought me a lot of healing and, being clairsentient, most dominantly or most commonly. Um, it was also just a delightful experience every time that I was on my healer's table, because I had such visceral experiences in my subtle and physical body. Um, and yet, as I moved into the training for level 2, and at this point, I'd been offering and had been sending Reiki to others, both in person and then actually even just last year through distance healing. There was something that just kind of was really stuck. Um, and in the context of just the state of, the US, just with the Aquarian age and of all the veils that have been recently lifted, what had kind of gotten snagged just ended up getting brushed against over and over again. And so for me, there is, no qualm against Reiki as a module. But I personally hold myself really accountable to practicing what I want to teach and what I do teach. And with Reiki, while I knew throughout all my trainings, even through to my level 3 masters, teacher practitioner training and certification, and again, right, just like these beautiful, powerful, literally life-changing experiences. I think for me, it's just knowing that the form of Reiki that is most dominantly taught and practiced um, in the world today came from, in a way, being taken from its Japanese lineage. There's just something in it that I didn't feel comfortable, I guess, practicing, because in a way, that is me participating. And I know that might sound really extreme to some people, but that's also, very much nuanced by my own intuition and my own lived experience, as well as my own lineage. Because what I realized was what I was practicing, in my mind and with my voice, I was calling it Reiki. However, distilling it beyond language, I am attuned to my gifts with energetic healing, and I am here to offer it for people. And the question was, is this Reiki? Does it have to be Reiki? Can it only be Reiki? I guess those are 3 questions. But one question led to the next. And, I sat with it for a long time because, of course, it's so widely practiced. Of course, it is literally taught to be so inclusive, so non-discriminatory. It's so compatible, and even its recent acceptance in the medical fields, right? And in, having been researched, having become mainstream enough, right, to be present in clinics and hospitals, and perhaps even for some insurers to be part of extended health. I just couldn't get unsnagged around that piece of like, well, why am I calling it Reiki, or why am I practicing this? And is it possible for me to offer energy healing in a way that is still respectful to the lineage without necessarily perhaps perpetuating its specific form, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you reflect on that, because I've gone through so much of that same reflection in my own practice. Because
Mm-hmm.
like very early on, I think when I was learning Reiki 1, I kind of I actually don't know what I did. I think I like untethered my my connection to my like grounding connection, and it just kind of like blew open all of these other energy frequencies that I was connecting with. And very, very quickly, and Ellen knows this too, because she's sort of been along for the ride, but very quickly I realized like, whoa, when I'm going in to do like an energy healing session, like many of the energies and what I'm doing are beyond Reiki.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
but it is this very delicate, like, okay, so what do people understand and what are they familiar with and open to trying? But what is also authentic to the energies that I'm actually working with. And I ended up like working with multiple teachers, and the majority of whom actually work on energy outside of Reiki itself. Because I was like, I have to be so responsible about this. Like, I can't just go in and tell somebody I'm doing a Reiki session when I'm not technically just working
Yes.
with Reiki. And I need
Yeah.
to know what I'm doing, because you can really fuck somebody up if you like go
Yeah.
in and something happens that you're not prepared for. So I was like, if I am opening these connections to all these other forms of energy, like I have to understand how to work with them and what my own gifts and connections are to help bring these through. And so it's I totally empathize with everything that you said. And like it's a constant reflection in my own experience as well.
Mm-hmm. For the record, I can totally relate to the untethering. I had an experience like that, except in the presence of somebody that I was like newly dating, and it was very, very much like a wild trip.
Whoa. Yeah.
But that's for like another chat, I think. But yeah, I love that you're still exploring and inquiring, and that's where that's the invitation that me sharing that decision was kind of like intended for, is just to look at, okay, so there's Reiki, and what else, right? Like
Right.
where are you beyond that?
Yeah. For me, it was like, it opened the door to my connections
Yes.
to much, much deeper, even art. And I don't want to say more powerful, because Reiki is very powerful in and of itself, but they're very different energies. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
even I one of my teachers who's a healer in in LA, he does very, very deep energy healing work. And I remember like the second or third session with him, he looked at me, and because I was like, I know I'm not working with Reiki energy, and I want to be responsible about it. And he looks at me and he goes, Reiki's for amateurs. And he was like, and you're right, you're not just working with Reiki energy, but like that is very perceptive of you to know that, because you're absolutely right. Like when people get into working with energy, and in particular like have never really spent time connecting with Reiki and learning about their own connections with it, it's like very franchised. and
Yeah.
and Ellen and I talk about this all the time. It's like, it just sometimes it really blows my mind that people are like, oh, here's my practice and here's everything that I do. And then also on the side, if you want like to check the Reiki box, I'll give you a session there too. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's everyone has their own journey. But to me, it felt very inauthentic and very irresponsible to just be like, oh, I'll just like check the Reiki box and then not acknowledge all of these other pieces that I'm moving into.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so multi-layered, because even within that, just how it's marketed,
Mm-hmm.
from the administrative or like business standpoint, even the body that, is supposed to be regulating this, it operates a lot differently than what the philosophies that are taught, are expressing. And so there's some dissonance there that for me is just a little bit too inconsistent for my own
Mm-hmm.
personal clarity. And yeah, I'm just so curious, about what it would look like if practitioners actually took the time, much like you have, to discern, right? The discernment is a big piece. And of course, when I look at the Reiki franchise that has unfortunately been very whitewashed, what I'm speaking to particularly is just that form.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even trying to tell anybody that they're not doing energy healing, but I think it's really harmful and it's dangerous if you've taken the one weekend training and are suddenly a self-proclaimed healer,
Mm-hmm.
yet you may not necessarily have all the inner resourcing to discern whether or not you are channeling something, whether you're receiving something, whether you're just having your own emotional reaction in your neurophysiology during a
Mm-hmm.
client session, right? Because as much as it's been a little bit more liberated into the mainstream, I've also heard of awful experiences
Yeah.
where it has been, straight up like energetic violation, right? Beyond,
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not just talking, oh, somebody went in and was disappointed that they just laid on a bed for a silent, 25 minutes or something, but it's like there are so many layers and so many different frequencies. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you go in just unhinging things and opening things without consent or without that understanding, right?
Yeah.
Um, that is when it's amateur hour.
Yeah.
And
I hear
that is
stories.
just so unfortunate.
I know. I heard this story the other day. This woman I know went to a Reiki healer for the first time and came back and was really mortified. And had a terrible experience. And I think part of it was physical because she had said it felt like there was like the weight of like a huge person like on top of her. So it was very physically uncomfortable, which to me is like
Wow.
that healer did not know what they were working with. Um,
No, and that's something else.
yeah. And then also like to have the experience where, those kinds of energies do unlock connections that sometimes we are very unprepared for. So she had this experience where, a loved one, she had like seen a loved one and connected with a loved one and was like feeling their emotions and also seeing them in her mind. And that is a very overwhelming experience if the healer doesn't
Mhm.
know how to either pull back, adjust it, help take you out of it. It's like, now what has been unlocked? Like, and
Yeah.
it just crushed me because I was like, oh my God. Like, it is an honor to work with people and to connect with their energy and to guide them and to hold space for them, but it has to be safe space. And it's like, it really does it makes me so sad to hear about those stories because I'm like, this is why it's so important to know who you're working with.
I find that
Mhm.
so much of this is like for somebody who's, gone through Reiki training but hasn't done their own inner work and is now practicing is, I think, I'm only 1 month into Marika Clymer's year-long apprenticeship. We haven't even started talking about energy. Like we,
Yeah.
Exactly.
you know, what
Thanks to
we're
Marika. Yeah.
it's totally. I mean, we're talking about what it means to create a safe space for community. What does relationship mean to us? Like it's so much decolonization work that we're
Mm-hmm.
going through right now
Mhm.
in this first month. And it's been a whole month. Like we're starting with the Hatha cultivation practices. So we've been practicing together once a week and also on our own. But aside from that, I mean, it's like we haven't even started talking about symbols, attunements, and how
Mm-hmm.
none of that shit. It's and I'm somebody
Mhm.
who went to a weekend, Reiki 1, Reiki 2 attunement thing, and then came out of it like definitely very transformed, but nowhere near the point where I was like, I want to practice this now.
Right.
It
Yeah.
was like being kind of tossed out, and the ideas that you practice then on your own for a while, but this, to me, it has to be such a walk, and it's not just about the attunement or learning how to channel energy or handle energy. It's more about your the condition of your own heart and your own being.
Yeah. That's why it was so important for me when I first started working with Sid. They were the first teacher that I had come across who did only one-on-one mentorship over long periods of time. So, I spent a
Wow. Yeah.
long time in reflection, in my own work, in inquiry around my own experiences, my own connections around what was happening. And then as those doors opened up, was able to find other teachers to help me continue my work with energy beyond Reiki. But that is, again, a luxury a lot of people don't have. And because it has become so franchised, it's like I think about that all the time. It's a really important conversation.
Yeah. And I do think that there's a thread back to rest where I do find that, like, because of the colonized nature of Reiki as it exists sort of in the West right now, I don't know if how do I say this? It's like I don't know if those who are learning in this capacity or in this form can like really understand true rest and true stillness, because I think the form of this modality that they're learning is already corrupt, if that makes any sense. I don't know, you know, it's like they're not receiving the healing that they personally need in order to be able to work with this kind of energy.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because I was literally thinking about this the other morning where it was like, there are times where I'll be working on someone or doing, working on myself. And it's like, you have to really get in there and be present. And it's all about the intention, right? So it's like, what was the intention behind taking that workshop or learning how to do this? Because if the intention was just to get attuned so that you can, chokeaway the shit out of your house, like, great. But like, really, that is scratching the surface, but at least you're doing it in a responsible way, because you're not then claiming to be able to heal other people without the experience and the understanding of the gravity of the power of what you're working with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely, sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say it's kind of part of what's currently ailing the spiritual and, community, if you'll call it that. Because while this impartial form exists, we also see it through other modalities and practices that have been displaced quite far from their own lineage. And it feels like there's still quite a bit of dialogue or time or understanding for the majority of people to recognize that it's not about ownership when we speak to, the lineages of practices, but it is about this responsibility. It is about the mastery of the specific craft or, modality, because in nature, it is so connected to everything. So, it, for me, my sore spot is just, yes, it's great that you are so driven to offer Reiki because it changed your life, yet that's a very different intention, right? Than perhaps, I've explored and mastered Reiki to a level where I'm really clear on how I can use that as some sort of portal to support XYZ, right? For me, that's kind of more of the majority that I see. Of course, this is not meant to be a blanket statement, but it hurts, right? It hurts me when I see this beautiful and very sacred practice popping up all over Instagram with just like these countless infographics about it, XYZ. And yet, on an energetic level, there's like something missing, right? Again, there's that dissonance that you can still pick up even through a screen. And yet, of course, then it topples over into the colonial capitalist wellness industry model where it's like, let me be your guru, let me be your healer, you need this, like, let me
Yeah.
complete you and heal you now. And of course, when we're desperate, when we're in pain, when we're at a loss, when we are up for trying anything, right, it's like, well, why wouldn't I? Sure, like, this sounds great. um but it's an unfortunate, byproduct of kind of that love and light optical
Mhm.
illusion, unfortunately. um so
I find that there's a lot of bypassing too around this. It's like people hear in passing, like, oh, Reiki is only like a high frequency energy and nothing bad can happen when you open the Reiki channels. But it's like they're inherently in that statement, if you don't know what you're doing, is the ability to cause some harm. Because yeah, maybe the Reiki itself can't cause harm, but if you have a healer who doesn't know what they're doing, that can cause harm. If you don't have a protected energy field, and things can come in and that can cause harm. Or you can offload something unintentionally or take on something unintentionally. And so it is, yeah, it is again this, like, everything always comes back to intention, where it's like, are you intentional about this in a way that you're able to be responsible and able to really be of service in a way that only brings healing?
yeah, I believe Marika recently had shared some very poignant um, truths along those lines as well, right? Talking about how the kind of, because of what I know, this franchised form has this disclaimer of like, oh, this is natural and so gentle, and there's no way it could harm you or be aggressive. Um, and like you said, Sam, right, that completely just bypasses the practitioner's responsibility
Mm-hmm.
because, of course, suddenly you're training all these practitioners to be like, oh, it's fine. Like, my intention is there, so that's all that it needs, right? Like, and of course, that's where we see the impact
Mm-hmm.
greatly varying among those experiences.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's where people come back from sessions and they're like, oh my God, I felt like a 300-pound man was laying on top of me and I couldn't breathe. And it's like,
yeah.
whoa, 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 whoa. That should never happen. Like,
Yeah. Or
oh.
even just, I mean, or it's also just like, hey, everyone, Reiki's not real. It's just a bunch of money grabs. Like, it really feeds into like the other
Mm-hmm.
bucket as well. And yeah, it just, yeah, it's probably another whole conversation. But, the other part that hurts as well is just witnessing the discrediting of
Mm-hmm.
Eastern esoterics, of Eastern medicine that has been effective and does have science, right?
And
But it's
so
just that it gets
powerful.
disregarded. Yeah, it just gets disregarded up until the point someone of a certain privilege or identity decides to co opt it. And then suddenly it's like, you know, welcome to Miracleville. Let
I
me cure
know.
everybody
I
and
feel
make a
like
lot
that's
of
the
money
goop
off of it.
effect. Totally. I feel like that's the goop effect. It's like anytime I see anything associated with goop, I'm like, well, there goes all the validity and like all the respect and like all, it's like just go pay $500 for some Joe Schmo to do an energy session on you and he doesn't even know what he's doing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh
Mm-hmm.
my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel like this could be a whole other episode.
Oh, totally. Sorry for the tangent.
No, it's good. It's good. I think, again, all these things needed to be brought up. But,
Mm-hmm.
we always love to ask this question at the very end, which is, as we started this conversation around rest, I really do think that even this tangent around Reiki and the colonization of Reiki has a lot to do with how we approach solutions for achieving like real, true, authentic rest within our bodies, within our systems, within our
Yes.
spirits.
Restedness.
Yeah, and I'm curious what one sort of piece of like life-changing wisdom has been for you through your whole journey of healing and awakening and expansion, coming in to create this community to support others, to as they try to find this elusive rest, and I'm curious, like, yeah, what is it that you live by now that you feel like you will never disregard ever?
Mm, I feel like this shows up in the way that I speak to it publicly. And to clarify, I the context is that I am seldom prescriptive, if at all, unless I have ample consent and time and energy shared with somebody to be able to speak so specifically. But one of the anchors that I still find to be holding really true with the rested revolution is that resting, the kind of resting that I'm talking about, is not another thing to do or to get. It is not a task. It is not an activity. It is not something that you need to measure. But that being rested is a way of being. So it's how we are showing up, how we decide to be in relation with ourselves, and therefore very much directly influencing how we're in relation with others. And so that is part of my own ongoing practice, to really recognize, right, as powerful as the different modalities are that we might use as pathways to kind of be able to walk together and to be able to experience together. I also know that it is such a personal journey and understanding, but also the personal choice, right, of what being rested actually is. And that's why it can look a million ways. That's why it can feel a million ways. And that's why it will change as well, as we do. So I often like to just, gently remind people it's much like stress, right? We're inevitably going to be confronted with unrest and restlessness. And we can allow ourselves to be human in that what once used to be restful may no longer be.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's so important too, because we always feel like we have to be only one part of ourselves or only one version of ourselves, and acknowledging that we, just like everything else in the universe, are in a constant state of flux is important, because your needs are going to shift in every expansion. And if you don't allow them to, you will continue to stay compact and stagnant. And that's just something that I've been like ruminating over for the past several weeks, because it's like that's a process we need to honor and celebrate rather than back away from out of fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To me, that's also exactly. I was going to say that's also, one of the gifts that we can finally receive when we are rested, which is maybe kind of paradoxical. But that requires time and energy and attention, and like nature, everything does. So where is it, right, that we're spending and saving our time, energy, and attention?
Thank you for all of this goodness. For this
Thank you.
This is like, I mean, again, I feel like the relevance and the divine timing of these conversations, it's not lost on me. And it's so interesting too, because as y'all were talking, when we were in the middle of the Reiki conversation, it just started raining and hailing outside my window. And it's almost like every time it rains, every time it has like, you know, this kind of intense weather, I see it as an invitation for rest and to retreat and just to kind of withdraw. Because it's so beautiful just to be staring out your window too and cozy in your house. And I don't know, it was just so perfect. It was almost kind of like the universe saying, "Oh, y'all." Yeah, exactly. It was a huge message. But yes, thank you so much, Flory. This was like a beautiful conversation that needed to be had.
Thank you both for having me. Such a joy. I feel like we could go on for hours.
I know. We definitely will have you back to talk about a lot of these different, you know, these little pathways that could be their own full, probably 5-hour episodes.
I know. I'm so fascinated about everything you guys are learning with Mimi.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's so cool.
It's really, really incredible.
Yeah.
Love it.
Music for Wu Nu is composed by Adam Miller.